Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Connecting Dots podcast. As usual, I'm your host, Usama, and today we are joined by Usaid, who's been with the telecom industry for quite some time, but rather, I should say, semiconductor industry. So, in the upcoming episode, we're going to be talking to him about the process of standardization in the telecommunications area. And second of all, we're going to be talking about patents and what you need to know about patents in general. So, with that, I formally welcome you to the show, Usaid. How had your day been so far?
First of all, thank you, Sama. Thank you for having me on your podcast. Day has been good. The weather is nice, so hoping for a great podcast today.
So, Said, let's get started with your professional journey first of all. So, give us a brief rundown of the roles that you've had in your career and how had it been overall for you, the experience?
In 2012, I started in Qualcomm. It was more like a testing role. I had to test the Qualcomm chipsets. It's chip by chipset. I mean, it's a thing at a very early stage where I have to put it on a system to even check if it can make a call or not. And later on, with all these testings and everything, then it becomes a commercial product, and then it goes into the Apples and Samsung and things like this at that time. So I started as that in a lab with a team working on different equipments. But I felt that this was more of for my personality. I came from a place where I was a very social person, and I liked to interact with different people at every time. And this is, I think, what my team saw in me. And then there was a small opening where they wanted someone who can go to different. Customers, I'd say, not customers, the labs, the interoperability labs across the globe, for example.
More like IODT,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
yeah. Like, for example, in Sweden, in Germany, in USA. And they started pushing me over there. And I used to go with the Qualcomm chipset to, test that commercially on their core network and base stations. And from there, the team in itself saw that the progression as well, that there's a certain, you actually pay a lot of dollars per day to do that testing. So you have to finish on deadline, you have to report your issues back, and you have to have a good rapport with the guys you're testing with, so that you actually get to the core problem very soon instead of a blame game. So I think this is where my soft skills came up, and I started helping company in that perspective, and it actually opened me a lot as well. And that's where a role of a standardization engineer came up in Germany. I was based in UK Qualcomm, and it came up in Germany, and it actually discussed about having these soft skills as a major skill, where you have to have a technical knowledge, but you need to be good in negotiations, you need to have a good presentation skills, you need to have a good diplomatic skills. I went into that thinking, okay, this is something where I can actually, with my technical knowledge, and I can do that. And from there, I didn't think about moving from England to Germany, because I thought that was as a career move, that I'm testing on 2G, 3G, 4G technologies, but they are providing me a platform to work on 5G communications, and it's going to be something that's going to take off. And this is what has been then from standardization engineer to senior standardization strategist, where certain promotions later, working in the mix of all these technologies, more technically, and and with more aggression. So this is where I currently stand right now. I'm hoping that in coming years it goes to the level of principal and more, but let's see how it
Super
goes.
exciting, man. Best wishes for you. And who
Thank you.
knows, if we go more than 8 CC carrier aggregation, who knows, we would be using your your ideas. Who knows?
I hope.
Sky's the limit.
I hope.
Anyways, now if we talk about your role in specific as a standardization engineer, and the reason I'm asking is that it's not very common that you interact with someone who comes from a research background, either someone's a business lead, someone's a program manager, someone's a developer, and whatnot, right? So for someone who's a standardization engineer, what are the general responsibilities that come with the role? And second of all, what are some of your typical, I would say, responsibilities, or what sort of capacity do you have to work in such a role to deliver what you were expected of?
Yeah, I think in standardization, it's more about you're working or you're discussing or brainstorming about a technology that is sort of has to be agreed by all the companies, and then needs to go into a technical specification document to be implemented by everyone. So it's more like that you are sitting with your team. You have two things. You have one is the of that particular standard cycle, the topics or the technology that needs to be discussed in different working groups that we will come to later. And then your company, that comes into figure as well at that point where, for example, in my company, if they are very much aggressively pushing for smart meters, so they need to have a technology where, if they're promising, sorry, their customer a good battery life, that means we have to think about it in a way that the battery drainage or the power, these things are being discussed during the meetings. So we then as a team discuss about these possible ideas, how to go along with that. And then the thing is, normally there are 8 meetings a year. And they are divided across the globe, 2 for North America and 2 for Europe and 2 for Asia. And the next 2 meetings, the other 2 meetings, they are then manually adjusted depending on if there is some sort of a hurry to do something, or the 6 are fine. So it varies between the 2, 6 or 8. So it's and if you take out the 3 months of summer vacations, there's normally not too much time in between. It's hardly 1.5 months in between. So it's like, for example, when I started as a standardization engineer, there was a certain company line that I had to follow and certain ideas that were being discussed by my team that were there before. I started with that, and then, till that release finishes, that takes around maybe a year or more than a year, 2 years, around 2 years. Then it keeps on, with every meeting, it's an iterative cycle that your idea goes there. It has been struck down because of some issues. You come back, you add some more things, you take some things off, you discuss with the other companies offline that, okay, how can this idea be implemented, or if you have any suggestions that if you want to support us, how can I make it better? And then you again go into the next meeting, and then you follow that particular thing, and then you present your idea again. So it's more like an iterative cycle that goes meeting by meeting. For example, I can give one example where at the second year when I was in the standardization side, I had this thing at the start of the release that I wanted with the company discussion and everything that should be in the next release cycle. And it took me till the last meeting of that release, I would say last 1 hour. It was more like the chairperson said, okay, we are in the last 1 hour. This is the thing that has been again presented by this company, by Osaid Khaliq. At that time, all the offline discussions and all the coffee discussions were over the last 1 year, 1.5 years. And gladly at that point, all the companies were like, okay, we're fine with that. Let's go with it. So literally at the last hour, the idea gets approved, and then you have to go into writing that down and then pushing it into the standard. So this is how it actually goes in terms of responsibility. Sometimes there's one more thing that I want to add. Sometimes then it also depends on role to role comes this thing, because you're working already in the standards and research. Sometimes the things that your company is selling, they're selling it to different clients, and they're also promising that if there is an infringement issue, you can come back to us. We have a patents department and we can look into it. And then comes this problem if we sold a module to some company and they came back, they said we have been sued by some other company for an infringement. So then they take our help again. It's also part of our job role where we look at the standards, we look at the thing that the company that sued the other company presented, that this was their idea, and then we start looking into the details of that, how this thing actually is okay, or it's something which they thought in a different point of view, but in the standards it was before that. For example, patent comes up with a date of 2006. I would look into a release that was before 2006, so that I need to know if it was there before, and they drive their idea out of it. And then we go to the clients and say, okay, we will on your behalf fight at this particular infringement. Also part of the responsibility of a standardization engineer to look into.
Now, second of all, let's kind of build a structure here. So now that we have defined what the role looks like, now let's talk briefly a bit about the need of standardization. Well, in very simple layman terms, why do we need standardization?
Okay. First of all, it's more like every country has their own telecom regulatory bodies. China, Canada, Germany, everyone has their own. These are the ones that are the ultimate authority, where they will be pushing a certain technology in the country. Then comes the regional players, like in Europe it's ETSI, in China is CCSA, in Japan, in Australia. So these are the regional bodies which are also trying to push for technology in that region. And then comes these global organizations like 3GPP, who are not an organization which is the ultimate authority, but more like making all these local and regional regulatory bodies click together. It's like the technical specifications for Mobilecom are being designed by 3GPP, the third generation partnership project. And they then are implemented by these local regulatory bodies and the regional bodies. One thing that why 3GPP is required is because then you will not be fighting for the politics of the region. Because you have an organization that is globally responsible to bring all these companies together, and then it's a given pact that all of these will have to sort of use this body's technical standards to be implemented in the countries. So that's how this standardization thing comes in the mix of the whole region.
So is 3GPP technically under United Nations?
It's a separate body. It's like under United Nations, it's ITU, International Telecommunication Unit. That's a UN agency that is responsible for spectrum allocation and developing high-level standards. 3GPP is a separate organization that is formed to, as I mentioned before, to have sort of a global technical perspective and deep dive inside, where from a physical layer point of view, where the ones and zeros go as well. So this is where they start doing things. And then to get internationally recognized, these agreements that they have, they send it to ITU. And then ITU sort of, also gets involved in all this. These are two different organizations, but they work hand in hand to make sure that the technology is implemented across the globe.
So if we talk about their jurisdiction and their authority, it's not like one is superior than the other. Is it more like they're working in parallel? Yeah. Or is it the fact that ITU, then there's 3GPP, and then there are other regional bodies? Is it that way?
The jurisdiction is majorly of the local telecom bodies of the country. That's who are responsible in their areas to implement all that. ITU is an sort of a UN organization. Is a UN organization that is actually working together with 3GPP. It's more like they are responsible to make sure that the technology, as I mentioned, to have the technology globally implemented as well. So it's not like 3GPP works under ITU. It's like they both are important for each other. Because, for example, when I talk about spectrum allocation, that's more like you have in every country a different spectrum where, you have a 4G spectrum, 5G spectrum, Wi-Fi spectrum, you have a satellite spectrum. So they look at it from a global point of view. So, and then 3GPP gets from there the spectrum details and the technical requirements, and then they start planning on top of that.
Right, interesting. And now that we have built the sort of a foundation of the need of standardization, now let's talk about what the standardization process looks like. So let's say you're a vendor company who makes equipment. You want a certain procedure or a certain protocol to be pushed into the next standard so that everybody gets to use it and eventually you get paid for it. How does that process look like? Like if we go step by step, what would be your thoughts about it?
So it starts with the study phase. For example, if it's basically an iterative, continuous cycle. But we are discussing from a point of view where a new company pops up and they wants to have something pushed into the standards. So they will come up with the idea, with the details about market analysis, the feature details, and the problem statement, and how this problem statement is solved. So this is study phase, and then they go into the main meetings where it's more like the study phase has to be then officially started in the cycle where during the meetings the study phase is going on, and different companies are coming up with their ideas. This particular standardization body, 3GPP, is a consensus-based setup. It's like the companies have to make a consensus on a certain proposal, certain agenda, and then it gets approved. So it's more like they come up with this plan, and the companies have a consensus, and they say, okay, let's have this study, and then it goes to the study item phase. Once that's done, then it goes to the next phase, which is the working groups. Specifically in 3GPP, they have radio access network groups, they have core network groups, they have security groups, architecture groups. So this particular item will then when it goes to the RAN working groups, it will be more like discussed in all those working groups, and their technical details and requirements will be drafted up. And then comes the third phase, where it's technical specification, to write that thing down, so that that particular document, it serves as a base for all the vendors and all the companies to use if they want to use that feature, and it has to be in a technical specification document. The documents keep on changing every now and then with the new updates, with the new revisions, with the new corrections and things like this. And at the end of the day, it then goes to the RAN, not the RAN, the 3GPP board, who actually gives the approval. When it's deemed mature enough, it actually goes to the board. Once it's approved, then it comes into the release versions. I mentioned release because in people who are very familiar with the telecommunication industry, specifically working in the core network or the base station side, they know that you have to have some sort of details that they have to pull out of the 3GPP website. So it works in release 15, release 16, release 17. It goes like this. So it is actually like when it goes to a certain release, then it's an iterative cycle. As soon as that release is finished, then in the next release, if they need, for example, they have this feature, they want some sort of more things they want to add on, or they want to take out some things. So then it goes to the next release to have a better version of that particular feature. Just a small example, for example, not very much into details, release 15 was the first release that came up with the idea of non-standalone 5G. That was, you have a 5G and 4G working in parallel. It worked over in release 15, this was decided. And then came release 16, where the idea was to have a standalone 5G. Even if you don't have a 4G network, 5G on its own can stand on its own. And then comes the ultra reliable communication and things like this. And release after release 17, additions on top of that. So that's how the release cycle starts. And then if you have, as a vendor, wants to come up with an idea, you come into any one of those releases as an agenda item, and then from there it takes off.
Right. And I want you to correlate this to the next G cycle, basically. So it's 4G, 2010. Then 10 years down the road, 2020, we have 5G. Then 2030, we'll have 6G. So how are these two correlated? So let's say in between this 10-year period, would there be multiple releases going on and then a final drop? Or in just very simplistic terms, how would you explain it?
As we discussed about release 15, release 16, release 17, so it's like every next release is an addition or anything on top of what was not there in the last release. So technology, for example, when it gets to a mature stage where there's a need to have the next G coming in, till that point there is sort of additions of different things coming on. I'll just give a small example. For example, right now 5G is implemented majorly across US, North America, Europe, everywhere. Now, the next big thing that's been discussed is the NTN, it's the non-terrestrial networks. You have a base station here, and you have a base station on a satellite. That's a low orbiting satellite. So it's like you don't have any coverage gaps. So when you're going in a car or something, and you're connected throughout. So this is something which is now being discussed for vehicular communication, for IoTs, for industrial IoTs, for 5G communication, this satellite thing to be added on. Meanwhile, when this is going on in the 3GPP, the study discussions outside this group, because the study discussions normally start from the local bodies, they are discussing the 6G, and they're directly discussing the 6G with the non-terrestrial networks to have this thing as not as a special thing on top of 5G, as an incorporated thing. So this is where right now the studies are going on, and probably once this study item goes into a phase where the consensus is reached that, okay, we need to now discuss it on a global platform where we need this technology to be implemented across the globe, then it comes to the organization like 3GPP, where they will start putting it into release. For example, at that time, maybe if it's 2 years down the line, maybe they'll call it release 19 or release 20, depending on what particular timeline has been discussed.
Right. That is pretty interesting. And now if we switch gears a little bit, I want to talk to Osaid as an engineer when he first started in the field. Now it seems more like it's a very research-heavy area. So when you first came in full of energy, you wanted to make an impact, talk to people, collaborate with them. How was your experience initially when you started and you started meeting people from academia, from industry? So how was that journey for you?
It was a very good journey. At the start, it was a bit of a learning curve. It was a big learning curve because again, coming from doing some lab testing towards a room which is full of companies like Apple or Google, and from Australia, from Japan, from China. It's like different regions all together in a room, and they are discussing things. And then it's a big learning curve where you need to actually see how you actually come along, or how you come up with your idea and then discuss it with different companies. As we discussed this major point of negotiating and diplomacy and things like this. Yeah. This then was more like a fun thing. At the start with my team was there. My manager was there who hired me, and they
a lot of stress.
So they trained me a little bit at the start how we go along with the things. They actually pushed me into the scenarios, which at the start I was like, okay, I need to be better prepared, because I was more like looking things from A point of view, but the guy is talking from a B.
You're the face of the company, right?
Yeah. So you're right. So this was the thing that I learned the hard way. And the company is asking something from the B point of view, and there's a third company that actually wants a C point of view, and you're like, oh, sorry, I know I need time to go into that. But then again, it's such a fast-paced thing. You have to have allies on your side. By allies, I mean the companies need to see you as an important person sitting there, because this is where they will come discuss with you the idea that they are pushing. Yeah. And this is the point where you will be saying, okay, I don't mind, because this is something which we also support. But this is the idea that I am pushing. What do you think about that? So there has been meetings where I would not name the companies, but it's like the big guns. X and Y are on my side. They're pushing for the idea that I also, as a company, my company wants in there. But Z and A, they are totally against it. But it has to be done in a way where comes the next meeting, Z and A are trying to take my sport, or I'm trying to take their sport, and X or Y are against it. So this is where the things actually get interesting, that you have to be friends with everyone, but also you have to be, technically well researched, that you're talking.
Right.
You're talking.
Have you ever met someone at one of these meetings where they could literally remember the entire standard or a release PDF, and they would tell you, go to this page, go to this section, you'll find that
Yeah.
information. Have you
Then
ever
just,
come across?
7 years in the thing, I still can't do it. But as you said, I have met a lot of people, and this is where it's more like, when they're talking about this thing, and you're like, when would I be at that level? Eh? Because it really is something. Because these documents, they are 300-page documents, and it's not one document. There's a series of these standards. It's 36.300, 36.311. Every layer actually has its own standards. Physical layer has their own, layer 2, layer 3, and all that. And you talk to these guys, and they're like, oh, I think in that standardization specification, this page number or this agenda item number, you can find it over there. Like, wow. I mean, these guys really have. I've seen guys, they're working in this particular domain for 25, 30 years. I mean, even more than that. And they're really into it. And this actually is sort of a motivation that, okay, you can actually, if you keep on pushing, you can keep on going. There's no end to it. These guys started when the GSM 2G technology came. And they're discussing 6G now. So what is stopping me to, say, okay, I think that the end is coming close by. I can keep on pushing. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Now, if we are going to shift gears a little bit, and if we talk maybe from a surface level, not going too deep about patents, and I want this conversation to be a bit more simplistic than to be way more technical. So just like we kind of broke down the structure of the standardization, I want to do a similar thing with patents. So first of all, let's talk about the importance of patents for any corporate, basically. Why do corporations take it so seriously? How is it adding a strategic value for them?
Patents are like the innovative ideas that actually helps companies with their licenses as well. For example, that's most companies push for the research-based engineers who are also good in innovation fields, creative fields, and in these patents as well, because it helps them in a way. For example, if I just started, for example, if it's me and I'm sitting with my manager and we are having a brainstorming session and we're discussing a certain agenda item. By agenda item, I mean a certain technology that we are discussing. And then we are looking at it from different point of views that, okay, is there any way we can, sort of do something that also helps our company? By our company, I mean, for example, if my company makes smart meters, I want to have less signaling information sent so that, the battery is drained less. So I'm just, from a generic point of view, vendors, other organizations, everyone has their own point of view. I'm just saying, I'm thinking this point of view, from this point of view, and it's like, okay, then this is my mental state when I'm looking for a certain technology discussion and brainstorming with my manager. And then we're like, okay, I think we can do this, we can do that, and then we certainly come up with some idea, and that's where we start writing it down. And then the main goal is that if that idea is strong enough and it's pushed into the standards, as I mentioned before, standardization is a global platform that is being used by all these regional bodies. So when they use the standards, then they have to sort of, there's a pool where all these patents go, and they have to sort of pay the licensing fee, or, you have these different packs. For example, if my company is using certain licensing things from Ericsson, and Ericsson wants to use something different, and that is a standard. These are called standard essential patents. And they want to use something that our company has patented. So there comes a pack that, okay, you don't pay the licensing fee, I don't pay the licensing fee, and, we work with that. So this is where the companies, in their audit reports that they do yearly, they actually mention this thing, that how much percentage of innovation that the company is driving, how much in the annual turnover, how much percentage was driven from this particular innovation field, innovative R&D basically.
Right. So for any technology savvy company would really want to have patents to themselves, because it ensures that they are the key players in the market, and that the invention does not stop. It keeps on going, and then whoever is using it, they get paid for it. Second question. Now, now let's say now we have a patent. Now I want to talk about the process of getting a patent. And then I have like two more questions underneath it, but let's go step by step. So first of all, now very briefly in few sentences, what is the process like of getting a patent?
This would be a little bit different for maybe I think what you're trying to get out of me, but because because the thing is, for example, if I talk about my company, we have this special team. They're called the patents team. They have lawyers, technology lawyers, actually.
But just before you go any further, we can maybe have some sort of a disclaimer for the audience as well. Let's not make it very, very specific to your company.
Yeah.
Because in my opinion, I think there would be few variations, but overall the process
Yeah.
might be the same, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk from a company agnostic point of view.
Okay.
So you're an engineer, you want to get a patent. What is the general process for it?
I think most of the companies, for a corporate company, most of the companies have these specific departments, the patent departments, because this process on its own is a very, very exhaustive process. It's more like, for example, a person who wants to write a patent. He comes up with an idea. He writes all this information about the problem statement, how he solves that, and everything. Then it goes to that particular department of the company, the patents department, where they have the technology lawyers sitting up there. And then they will have a discussion and they will say, okay, we did a little bit of research and these are some of the prior art. Prior art is like something that was written as close to the idea that I had or the guy have. That they found it was already written, and the way you mentioned it, it's already patented before. They have to make sure that the idea they're going to push towards for the patent approvals is a genuine idea. So from there, you sort of have a discussion with them. You tell them, okay, how the idea that you have written is different from the other things, because they're technology lawyers, but you're also sort of a technical person, so you will have a little bit of a different perspective, maybe from more deep point of view. So you'll explain it to them. If they say it's fine, then it goes to the next phase, which is like they present this to the patent office, where they will be they'll file it over there.
And that'll be specific to the country that they're in.
Yes, for the start, specific to the country that is in, and the examiner will have an appointment, and they will be back and forth some discussions about what an examiner thinks, what you think, and what by you I mean that patent office thinks, and they'll come back to you and say, okay, this is the reply we received from examiner, and this is what he's trying to say, and then you come up with the answers to that. Okay, this is I think what is different to what he's trying to say, so maybe you can argue in these particular lines. And once the examiner is satisfied, then the process actually starts where, there's a queue, I don't know, depending on country to country, it's 2 years or 3 years, then it's filed in that particular country. And from there on, it is then the strategic importance to the company that what they do. They either start doing it on country to country basis or how they go along with that. So you have, for example, if you have a patent, if someone wants to write a patent and the company says we want to have this particular patent granted in USA, granted in Korea, granted in Japan. So it will be done in once you get the first patent, then it's easier to get along to other ones. But this is actually the process where you can have it granted in different countries, depending on what the corporate's strategic interests are.
Okay, so now second question in this regard. So let's say you've gotten a patent either individually or as a group. What's the life of a patent?
Normally, a patent lasts for 15 years. It's around 15 years for technology patent. So some companies, they have different way arounds to how to prolong the life for that. But it actually starts from the day that the patent is granted. And don't forget, there's a time in between as well where the patent has to be granted. Sometimes it takes more than 2 years as well. But the good point is, because the patent was already submitted to the patent office, and after 6 months a new person comes up with the same idea, but because the patent is not yet granted, but it becomes part of prior art, that this is already in the records of the patent office. So this is where certain companies have certain ways to prolong a patent's life. Because once it's granted, then it's 15 years, and after that, it's the public property.
You were the king at that time.
Yeah. So they want to make the maximum money out of it when the licensing fee and everything is going, because even we talked about different Gs, 5G, 6G, 7G, but the core most of the times of these signaling and these small things, they stay the same sometimes. So it's more like there's a quite a good chance that this particular thing, if it's not a very big blocking point, will be transferred to the next technology as well. So this is where, the more the life, the more opportunities for company to earn more money.
Right. Now, consider me as a layman person that I'm not associated with any corporate. I'm just a person who's tech savvy. I want to read a patent. Can public have that access to read a patent?
Yeah, I mean, public has the access. All they have to do is they have to, depending on what specific patents they want to read, they can just Google it. There are different websites that, for example, just patent.com and things like this, where, it gives both ways, where you search for a technology and then it gives you patents related to that technology. Or if you know the person's name, you can write the person's name and the patents that particular person has. That comes up over there. The patents are very well written, but well written, I mean, they're very explanatory. They have figures in there, if interfaces, protocols, things like this. Then and a big description of what it actually is. The sort of confusing part is where the technical patent is actually written. That's right at the end, and this is where it comes up that, for example, I would say as an example, a UE has to do a certain thing, and then whereas in B as mentioned in A, and then from there you cannot be like, okay, I'll just read the point 1 and the point 5. No, you just go along with that because it's all connected to each other. So, but if you read a patent, if anyone wants to read a patent, I would recommend to, spend some time, read the whole of it to actually understand it, and yeah.
So, what are the minimum requirements to file a patent? So, I remember seeing the patent for touchscreen, just out of curiosity again. I remember seeing a picture. I remember seeing some explanation in very simple English that people could understand. But then I didn't really see a very big document explaining things. It was just about what the idea is. This is how they think it would look like when they'll build a prototype, because it hasn't been built yet. So what are those minimum things that you need to provide in a patent?
Again, I think it would be different in different walks of field, the patents. For me specifically would be talking about the patents in the telecommunication side. And from there, it's the minimum requirements is that you're actually explaining, with the help of figures as well, how the thing is actually working. Because as I mentioned before, as I mentioned that since I'm a person who's working in the telecommunications field, so when I'm reading something, I need to actually know how the interfaces and the protocols are also working, as he has mentioned, that the message is coming from my phone to the base station. And as per the patent, the message back from the base station to phone is something different to what he's suggesting would solve the problems. So I actually have to see how it actually, in the figures, he's trying to explain it. And then if I use a little bit more technical words, that, okay, in frequency division, in time division, and things like this, how it actually works. So the technical detail of the patent has to be there. Because most of the patents generally incorporate, because 5G in itself is not only a mobile communications technology. It includes satellites, vehicular communication, IoT, industrial IoT. So the patent has to be technical and detailed enough that it incorporates most of these things if the feature is being used by all of them. So to write that, and this is where, as I mentioned, the corporate offices, they have these patent teams that come in handy. That you give them an idea, you write it down in the basic terms. If you are comfortable enough to discuss it with the person who's technically more advanced than you, he will help you write it in much more technical details then goes to the patent office, the one that your company has, not the official one, the one your company has, the patents department, and they will try to then write it down in a way that is actually the process is, with the figures and everything, and then you review it and you say, okay, I think the idea is very much well explained and it is very in a broader point of view. So I like it. I think it should go to the next level, and then it goes to the proper patent office, and from there, it's your luck if it gets granted or not. So
Right. Now that we have a very thorough discussion about research at corporates, which includes standardization and patents, I want to talk a bit about pure academia as well. Like when you were a student in maybe your bachelor's, master's, or PhD, at that time, what do you think is or had been the role of your teachers that really inspired you to be the person that you are in the telecommunications world?
I personally believe the impact of teachers is actually very high when it comes to defining a particular career. I can, for example, in my case, when I started this particular degree, I thought that, okay, I will focus more on the networking side, network engineering and network architecture and things like this. But somehow during the degree, it felt like that, okay, I mean, I'm not very much, too sure if this is the right thing to do. Okay, I can also, from my part, say that maybe I was lagging and I was not trying to, sort of focus more on that particular domain. I was also getting distracted, things like this. But this is where I think the impact of the teacher actually comes, because soon after that, we had this amazing teacher that came up with the digital communications thing. Her name was Madiha, amazing teacher, and she did the digital communications class in such a way that it actually changed the thought process that, okay, this is something very cool. You are actually looking at all how these core networks, base stations, mobile world is working, the digital communication. So this is something very interesting, and it went to that part where we actually asked her, where did you actually learn all of this? And she mentioned about University of Surrey in England, where she actually learned this specific course. She did that, and that was the time me and my best friend, we went home and we started asking our parents, okay, we need to do that. We need to do that. It really is a very cool thing, and I think we can actually excel in that. And this is where the passion was also coming out that, okay, if we have to do something, this is where, the heart and brain also wants to do it, so we can sort of excel in that. The parents got convinced. We enrolled into a same role that she went into. We did that mobile and satellite communications thing from England. And from there on, then towards the professional career to Qualcomm and everything. But this particularly, I believe that the impact that she had for us to move into that particular telecommunications domain, the way she taught it, actually caught the interest. And I think 12 years of technical professional experience now, and I still remember that the way I entered into the telecommunication, and still, 12 years is a long time in a particular field when you're doing it with passion and you're progressing as well. So this has been really good, and I'm very happy that we actually came towards this side of telecommunications.
That's perfect. And ma'am Madiha, if this content ever reaches to you, hats off to you. Definitely. So now if we switch gears a little bit, let's talk about core values. So what are some of the core values that you uphold in your life?
I mean, I very much follow what Bill Gates once said, that a lazy person is the most creative person, right? I think he mentioned it somewhere. I hope it's not a meme or something, but I think I read it somewhere. So, so I think, but for me, I think that's actually correct, because I myself consider as a very, very lazy person. But when it comes to a push where, I have to meet certain deadlines, the creative person in me wakes up from nowhere. I don't know. I can be doing something in an iterative cycle, and certainly a discussion comes up that this is the deadline of things like that, and then it will be like, okay, let's find all the shortcut ways to finish it, but in a way that it is actually acceptable. And so one of those things has actually helped me that be what you are. So, for example, I consider myself as a lazy person. So then my creative person comes up when it actually needed. So that, I think this is the thing that actually helped me during my professional career as well. So
Yeah. Silly question. And again, just being a tech savvy person, 5G has a lot of interesting features that were not there in 4G and are really, at times, very helpful. Which one's your favorite feature and why?
I personally like vehicular communication, V2X basically. The idea of cars talking to each other and making decisions in terms of safety and things like this. It actually is very very. I mean, I personally like it because I believe it will abolish a lot of safety hazards that are on the road because this V2X incorporates vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to person, vehicle to pedestrian, all these things. So it actually is a whole ecosystem where they are talking to each other on a different interface. They are connected to a mobile interface, and in the new discussions, they're also connected with a satellite interface. So it's a complete ecosystem, and it actually, when it is implemented and it is a daily norm for all of us to use it, I think it will actually save a lot of time. It will actually help us plan a lot of long trips without any traffic problems. It will solve a lot of safety hazard issues and things like this for so many people.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'd love to see, or I'd love to live to that time where
Yeah.
we can experience all of that
Fingers
to
crossed, I
its
hope,
peak.
yeah.
Definitely. So now that we're reaching the end of our conversation, Asad, what would be your advice to students or early career professionals now that you look back at your journey? And what would your advice be in terms of how should they be structuring their professional growth? And how should they position themselves in a very strategic way that could really help them in becoming someone someday?
Just a fun fact that for this question, I had a discussion with my wife as well, and I said I'm really confused, and she said you should go with your tagline that you always say. And then I realized because my tagline is that when I was passing my university, at that time everyone was very much focused on what is your GPA, what is your GPA, and everything. And I was, with my friends having this posters. GPA doesn't matter, you have to be so much more than what you are. I believe all the technicalities that you learn during your degrees, they matter, but also your soft skills. Because right now, after working in UK and after working in Germany, I've seen most of these companies, they also spend a lot of time to know about what your soft skills are. They want you to be a team player, and they want you to be, for example, when we had this patent discussion, they want you to be an open person who has this. If they have an idea, they discuss it with the team so that it actually helps the company to do something. It's not like you have this idea and you go home and you're like, okay, I will only think about it myself. So my advice would be that with your technical studies and everything, also focus on your soft skills. For this, join different groups, try to sort of indulge in all these different things, which helps your personality grow. And for the early career professionals, I would suggest that be very, very active on LinkedIn. Look at all the technical trends that are going on. Contribute with different discussions that particularly is of your area of interest, because on LinkedIn as well there are many groups where you can actually contribute, where people are asking questions, or you're sort of writing something that you want to share with some people. So build a network of people over there. It's very easy on LinkedIn that you do that, and from there on you can actually see, you can get advice of different people that, okay, you yourself want to be at a certain level in your life, so what route you should choose. And you can get a lot of help from there. And this is one of the things that helped me as well with all my roles, and I would strongly suggest that.
So with that, we'll close the conversation here, Osad. I'm really happy that I got to have an in-person recording with you in our studio while you were here. And as far as our audience are concerned, I hope you really liked the content and you got to learn a bit more about telecommunications industry, in specific talking about standardization, patents, and how do they create an impact in our lives. So until the next episode rolls out, do check us out on other streaming platforms. And this is your host, Osama, signing off, and I will catch you in the next one. Thank you.